It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, February 11th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that it's wondering just how realistic are these Scott Laughton trade rumors.
I wonder.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can follow us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials. And of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today is our Tuesday show, of course, where we will be discussing the Lehigh Valley Phantoms week that was, and we're going to preview Team Canada and Team Sweden for the Four Nations tournament. So that'll be a lot of fun. Belated congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles since we recorded the Monday show before the game was played. Happy for our entire city on that front. So the Scott Laughton trade rumors, I feel like they've picked up a little bit in the last week or so.
They have, but I'm going to use this as an analogy. I feel like this is an episode of American Pickers where this guy, Mike Wolf, who does the show, he goes in there.
Okay. I am not familiar.
I know, and that's why I'm explaining.
Okay.
And he goes in there and he's found a guy who's got this classic car and he goes, "Oh, this is your favorite car." "Yep, it's my favorite car." "Well, is it for sale?" "Well, name me a price." And then he names him a price and then the guy never sells it. That's pretty much what we're going through here. Danny puts Scott out there every year on trade rumors and sees if somebody's going to pay a ridiculous sum for him. And if they're willing to do it, then he would trade him. Otherwise, I don't think he will.
Yeah. So Laughton is on a pretty solid contract for a
Mhm.
team to acquire, right? Which is why the rumors are
Yes.
there. He's making $3 million a year. He's got one more year left on the deal. And I'd say like his stats this year are close, but not quite as good as last year,
He's not as effective
proportionally.
as last year. We could say that.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, he's not entirely as effective in his overall game.
Mhm.
Now, he's got 0.83 goals per 60. He's got 1.94 points per 60 at 5-on-5, which is third highest on the team right now, which is, I think, pretty impressive. He's fifth on the team in shots per 60 right now. He's currently 2 goals short of his total from last season and obviously much fewer games.
Yeah.
He did have that 4-goal game, so you kinda have
Mhm.
to consider, like, still those goals are goals,
No,
so
and they count.
they count. So, I think he's been pretty good on the scoring side of things. I think it's like the rest of his
That's what's
effectiveness is
dipped.
where he's fallen short a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's what's dipped. He's definitely, going to get more goals than he's had, but certainly he's had defensive gaffes that we're not used to seeing from him. So that's
Right.
the thing.
Yeah, and he's definitely on ice for more goals against
Oh,
than
yeah.
goals for. Like, and that's partially due to how he's used, right? Because
Yes.
he's put out there in key defensive situations very often. So that I think is naturally going to happen. He's been on the penalty kill pretty consistently for the
Yes.
last several years. So we've seen his effectiveness there, where he does make some defensive mistakes. But then again, you look at like he and Travis Konecny on the power kill, they get their odd man rushes,
Mhm.
uh, not infrequently, I would say, for a typical penalty kill.
Right. No, that's fair. I mean, maybe a few less than last year, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think compared to your average penalty kill, they
Yes.
probably get more rushes there. So I think all that being said, and circling back to your original point about what Danny Breer wants to trade him for, because he has said pretty consistently that he'll accept no less than a first round pick in
Right.
exchange for him here. And I feel like some people are suggesting that that's payable now versus in the past they haven't. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I do think in the right circumstances, trade deadline prices are high, right?
Sure.
So if you hit the timing right, I don't think it's impossible, but still don't think it's very likely.
I mean, if you had a top team that had like 3 first rounders, sure. But no top team has 3 first rounders. It's all the other teams that have it. And so that's the problem there. And so like if you are a top team, you have to really believe he's going to get you a Stanley Cup if you're giving up a first. And as an example for Toronto, I'm hearing the name Fraser Minton being thrown around. And he's a 6'2", 20-year-old center who played this year and is having an excellent year with the Marlies. Why in the
Right.
world would they do that? They wouldn't trade
No.
him. They would trade somebody else and a pick. They're not trading that guy. So like when I hear this on like a broadcast, I just chuckle and say it's not going to happen. But yeah, if somebody gave a first, sure, then it would happen. But I have a hard
Right.
time believing that that's going to happen.
Right. And if the offer was there for a first, and the Flyers could get a 2026 first or even a 2027 first,
Yeah.
I think that would be a useful asset to have in exchange for him. But like, who besides Toronto is in the market for a guy like Scott Laughton, who's going to be either a 3C or a utility winger?
The Jets are another team. I mean, we do hear about that. And they've had some younger guys that have panned out, but they need some more playoff depth, I think, or guys with playoff experience because they have, they're a team now that's looking like they can make a big cup run. And I'm not really surprised, but I know some are. But the thing is, so I look at the Jets draft picks. They have a first, they have no second, they have 1/3, and they have no fourths. So if they trade for Scott Laughton and they don't have a good cup run, then you've got nothing at the draft
Yeah.
for the first
Yeah.
3 rounds. I mean, teams have done that. It's not unprecedented, but I just feel like if they're going to do that, they're going to do it for a bigger piece than Scott Laughton. And that's where I think the problem lies here is finding that team that is willing to do that and doesn't worry about losing that first for him. That's why I can't find a team for that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where maybe they would push it down to like a 2027 if
Yeah,
if
they
they were
might.
gonna
And then
do
that
it.
would be probably the way, like in the Walker deal, they push that down the
Right.
road.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the way, but again, I think Lawton is not on the top of a lot of teams' lists. I think
Right.
he's talked about, and I think he's probably plan C on a lot of teams' lists. So that's another thing. Because, as an example, uh, there's Jake Evans out there. So Jake Evans from Montreal, also a center. Uh, that's a
And
guy.
that'll depend on if Montreal decides that they're
They
buyers
are.
or
They are. They're
sellers
sellers.
or
They're,
stick and put,
yeah.
you
From
know?
everything that I'm seeing and hearing and what I work on with the hockey news, they're going to be sellers. And so that's another situation where he is younger than Scott Laughton. He's faster than Scott Laughton. So he's probably a more attractive trade piece at the moment over Laughton. So, like, hey, if you don't get Jake Evans, then maybe you look at Laughton. So I think that's also a part of it.
Yeah, I think so. And it will depend like where in the cadence of the potential trade deadline deals this would fall
Right.
to that point. Exactly,
This is
right?
a last minute decision. This
Yes.
will come down. This is not happening over the
Which is
Four
always
Nations
the
break.
case with him,
Yes.
right?
Oh yeah.
Always the case
He's
with
used
this
to it at this point,
potential.
poor guy. He's like every year he goes through
I
this.
know, it's the worst. Then like the other thing to me that is a factor here is that, we talked on yesterday's show about Garnet Hathaway
Hmm.
mentioning, that he missed Frost and Farabee in the locker room and it was this weird gap when the new guys weren't there yet. And so there was like this emotional hole in the
Right.
locker room, right? Without the new guys getting there right away, which is usually how a trade goes. So there's like less time to mourn, right?
Yes.
And so the Flyers have just gone through this with additional time to kind of mourn the loss of their two friends who were an integral part of this locker room in terms of team culture.
Hmm.
And when you trade two guys who are kind of the core of your team culture, like to me, trading a third guy, like that risks like your overall culture to me in my opinion. I think that there's a reason to do it ultimately if you get the right return, but you have to consider that as well. That do you want this much change in your locker room when you've spent 2.5 years trying to build this like team attitude?
Right. So really the crux of this comes down to, if the Flyers were to re-sign him, how many years does he want? He probably wants 4 or 5, and honestly, I would not want 5 years of Scott Laughton. If I could get him on 3, that would be ideal. If he says, "Hey, I'll sign for 3," okay, because then
Yeah.
maybe by year 3 they're a contender, and then after that, if Laughton's game just gradually falls off, every year, not a big thing, but a little, then you're okay, you're covered.
Right.
But it's not like he's going to have another career year. So I think the term on his deal is really important, and that's what we don't know. We don't know what that conversation's going like. It's not reported, but I imagine they've talked about it, and we'll talk about it probably starting July.
Right. And that's where my question comes into play because it's how much longer do you need him in the room to maintain that Flyers culture? Or does it make it more likely that they'd be willing to trade him because now they're just accepting the fact that it's going to be a slightly different team culture and you don't need Lawton to maintain it, right? It could go either way.
Yeah, this was something maybe to ask John Tortorella before he got on the plane, but now he's a Team USA guy. No, I'm kidding. Um, but no, I
Yeah,
think
I don't know the answer. I just think it's a
I,
valid
I thought
question.
about this, and I think if I was going to trade him, it would be now at this deadline. If Scott Laughton doesn't get traded at this, because you have already made
And you
these other
keep him
moves.
for the duration. Yeah.
If you're not, then you are keeping him for the duration. I feel like, because
Yeah.
if you're going to wait until next year at the deadline, you're getting less. There's just no
Right.
way around it. And so, like, that's the whole thing. You're either trading them now or you're not trading them. Like, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. I think I agree with that in the end. All right. Well, it is the Four Nations break, and the first game of the tournament will be between Sweden and Canada. We're going to talk about those two teams coming up next. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy, just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored job post puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. When the pressure's on and every day without the right person is a setback for your team, that's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. It'll make sure that those candidates see your post immediately. And you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to indeed.com/locked on right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Flyers. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. On tomorrow's show, we are going to talk about Team USA and Team Finland, the other two teams in the tournament. We're going to answer your mailbag questions on the Wednesday show as well. So get those in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. Send us a message on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers or comment over on our YouTube channel. So, as of our recording, the latest news about Four Nations, Jake Sanderson has officially replaced Quinn Hughes on Team USA. So bummed out for Quinn Hughes and Team
Yeah.
USA. I think it's a big
And
loss
Sanderson's not going to
overall.
Mexico now, clearly.
Yeah, that is definitely true. So we'll talk more about how that'll affect Team USA on tomorrow's show. Travis Konecny was ill and did not practice with Team Canada at their first session. So hopefully he's feeling better in time to play in the game itself. John Cooper is coaching Team Canada from Tampa with assistant coaches Bruce Cassidy, Pete DeBoer, Rick Tocchet, and Misha Donskov. That is a lot of chefs, let's say.
All who didn't want Logan Thompson. We just point that
Yep.
out.
Yeah, you know, it is what it is, I guess. But Sidney Crosby, who is their team captain, is officially going to play. He did practice with the
I
team
figured.
Yeah, so, that's good for Team Canada, and I think good for the tournament
It
overall, right?
is. I mean, if you have Sidney Crosby in the tournament, it adds something. There's no way around it. Even if you're rooting for Team USA, you want to see Crosby in this tournament.
Yeah, it's kind of, gross in a really good way that Sidney Crosby is your team captain and Connor McDavid and Cale Makar are assistant captains, like, what? What?
Yeah,
The
it's
most ridiculous team
it's an
ever.
age thing. There, it's respect,
Yeah, yeah, but, I kinda love to see it, and, recently they added, Drew Doughty to the roster.
which is a hell of an ad.
Yeah, just, as an afterthought.
Hey, Drew
Let's just
Doughty,
have
why don't
one
you
of
come
the
to the
top
tournament?
defensemen in the
Yeah,
league.
yeah.
So, they had had, like, one open roster spot, to that point, so he wasn't,
Well, they were holding
replacing.
it for him because they knew his return
Yeah,
was
to see if he was
imminent.
gonna be healthy,
Yeah,
right? So, that, solidified that. Mark Scheifele was the potential replacement for Crosby, but it seems like it won't be necessary unless, something goes,
right.
terribly wrong there. In the meantime, Team Sweden is being coached by Sam Hallam. Danny Alfredson is gonna be your assistant coach there, which is so cool. Love to
Yeah,
see
yeah. He's so
Alfie.
well liked. Everybody
I
likes
know.
Alfredson.
Like, absolutely. Victor Hedman is their team captain with Matthias Ekholm, Eric Carlson, and William Nylander. That is a great trio for your assistant captains
Although, really, I
there.
don't think Nylander is much of a leader. That's just me. I would have given it to Forsberg. I
Mm,
think he's more of a
yeah.
leader, but
I
that's
mean,
me.
pure talent though,
Sure, that's
like,
what they're
pretty
going with
good.
is the talent. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, this
yeah.
team's talented too. I mean, their blue line is tremendous.
Right. So they haven't had any more recent changes to their roster as of recording there. We'll see what happens with their initial practice and lines there,
Yeah, I mean,
but
Leo Carlson could be an extra.
it seems like that's what could happen
Yeah.
here. But we'll see because the addition of Raquel that we talked about recently, he's a guy you just put in,
Yeah, oh no,
right?
he's a proven scorer in the NHL. He's playing.
Yeah, like, even though he's a replacement, he just
Right.
deserves to go straight in the lineup there. You look at a projected like, he's a projected 3rd liner
Yeah.
with Eriksson, Ek, and Kempe. So, that's a hell of a 3rd line right there.
I mean, their fourth line's really good. This team's really good. They could beat anybody at any given moment.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is so these 2 teams are gonna be playing each other in that first game,
Yeah.
and given the strength of Team Canada offensively, that Sweden blue line, which is very strong, is gonna have to do a lot of extra work, and they're gonna have to depend on their goaltending.
They're gonna depend on the goaltending, but I think they've got the right mix of everything else. Their blue line is gonna be exceptional for puck moving,
Yes.
dangerous for scoring. Uh, if Brodin's an extra, that's a hell of an extra to have because he could do great things defensively. So, yeah, I Sweden can beat Canada like they can.
I think it's possible, but, like, if I'm gonna put money down, I'm putting money down on Canada for
I
this game,
mean,
but
first game, I might bet Sweden only because, and you got to hear me out. First game always takes a little bit of time to gel. And,
mhm.
a lot of these Canadian guys have egos and they're playing different roles. And I think the Swedish guys are probably playing closer to their roles. And you got a guy like, as an example, Eric Carlson. People may have marginalized him because he's on a bad Penguins team. But when you put him on a team like this, he's back to being Eric Carlson for offensively, especially. So I think it comes down to the goaltending. And to be honest, I think Sweden has just as good a goaltending as Canada. It
Yes.
might even be better. Uh,
I
so
agree with that,
so I think
and I
that could
think
tip the game, really.
yeah, absolutely, and I think that's where that comes into play is that I think Canada could absolutely get goalied by Sweden. I
Yeah.
think that's a definite possibility, and especially, if you have Victor Hedman and Rasmus Dahlin clearing the puck for you
And they're gonna play
in
30
key
minutes.
situations. Yeah, they really are. I mean, maybe not 30 because
Well,
these are all like
27. They're gonna play
yeah,
27, 28 minutes. If you think for a minute these teams care about what they're gonna do when they go back to the NHL teams, they do not.
I think there's probably some concern about that ahead of time, but then once the puck drops, it's
Correct.
like, okay, the
It's out the
pride is
window.
on the line
Correct.
here, and
Yeah,
we're going to do what it takes. So, and and I think especially with Sweden, I think there's an extra layer of pride here
I think
on
so
the
too.
line, and so yeah, I think it is going to be a very fun game nonetheless. I
Yes.
do think, you know, is the bottom 6 forwards of Canada weaker than Sweden's bottom 6?
It's a good question. I like
'Cause
Sweden's for sure.
yeah,
I think they represent more of a, I don't know, scoring threat. Although no, I shouldn't say scoring threat. I should say all around threat because a guy like Nyquist at this point plays pretty good all around. Like no offense to Hagel. Hagel's a good player. Bennett and Sorelli are top players, so that's a big deal. But Hagel is like, eh. So if you want to say,
yeah.
I like Nyquist better than I like Hagel. Lindholm's very good at a role. Arvidsson is always still tricky. And then if you look at the other line, if it is Seth Jarvis, Braden Point, and Marshawn Shore, they get the edge offensively, but then
But not
not
defensively.
defensively. Eriksson Ek
And
is
you need
really
that from your 3rd line
Eriksson
sometimes.
Ek's really good, and Kempe it can be very
Yeah.
physical. So
Mhm.
I think there's an eliminating factor there. Well, that's what I'm saying. I could see this being a
Yeah.
1-goal game.
No, I get it, and Bennett is considered maybe the scratch there if Konecny goes back in and plays on
Right.
that 4th line, which changes it in terms of the attitude, but not necessarily the overall skill, I think. But,
Right. I mean, if Bennett
I
takes dumb penalties, I mean, then you're
mhm,
just switching it to another guy who might take dumb penalties. But
yeah,
Konechny
so
is more offensive this year than Bennett.
yeah, and I expect to see Gustafson and Hill in net for these
Yeah.
first games, so we'll see. We'll talk more about it when they take place. Of course, this first game will be Wednesday night between these two teams. So we'll talk about it on Thursday. In the meantime, the Phantoms are back in action after their All Star break. So we're going to talk about them coming up next.
When the game tips off, the NBA action's just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing for my team or a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. Never feel like I'm missing any chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
So the Lehigh Valley Phantoms had a split decision week this week with a 3-2 shootout win over the Cleveland Monsters, which is great because Cleveland is a very good team.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it was followed up by a 4-2 loss to the Hartford Wolfpack, which is a team that's right below them in the divisional standings there, which keeps them static at 5th in the Atlantic. They're 6th in points percentage, though, as we've been talking about. Most of the other teams have had games in hand. Now, the other teams are catching up right now in terms of games played. So the Pens are still 5 games in hand, but everyone else is either the same as the Phantoms or 1 or 2 games in hand on them right now. So we're creeping up toward comparable records here, but
It's
it's still not close with the
No,
Pens.
and they only have 12 regulation wins, and that
Yeah.
can definitely be a big factor. Hartford has the same. So that could end up being a factor down the line now. And so,
Yep.
yeah, this is again, I don't know what it is. You pointed it out about 3 weeks ago, and they always seem to lose the game going into the next week. And I don't know
They
why.
do. They do. It's very, very weird, and they had the lead in this game
Yeah,
against Hartford too, and could not hold on to it, which is, I think, a problem they've had.
it is.
It's their consistency. I think that's an overall issue. with them at the moment. Jacob Gaucher did play in their Friday game because he played Thursday for the Flyers, Friday for the Phantoms, and then Saturday for the Flyers again. So that was a very busy week for him. Although it probably just felt like a regular AHL schedule,
Yeah.
all things said and done there. But um, you know, we talked about it on the show yesterday in terms of the other roster moves. You can go back and listen to that for
We
some
do.
more detail. But I think, obviously the biggest thing was not sending Kolosov down. And, I think that kind of bore out a little bit in these two games where you had Parker Gahagan, who had a really strong game against Cleveland, 24 saves on 26 shots. And he had two shootout saves. He didn't let any goals in the shootout, which was great,
Hmm.
which allowed the Phantoms to win that game. But like Petrozelli is just never going to steal a game for you. And
No.
I don't think Gahagan necessarily is either. I think there were some other mitigating factors there. So, I think without Kolosov, the Phantoms really are teetering on not making the playoffs.
No question. And this is something where like the Flyers organization will put up a brave face right now and say, yeah, 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 it's all part of it, whatever. But I'd be shocked if he's on the roster next year for any Philly team. I just don't think he's going to be around. I could be wrong, and things could always happen, and there always could be injuries. But it just the way this is playing out, it just seems like he tried the AHL, he didn't like it, and he's going to stay on the NHL payroll as long as he can.
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of some bright spots
Mhm.
for the weekend, Oscar Eklund scored for the first time since November. That was
Yeah,
really
he
good
he has
to
not had a
see.
great year.
No, Alexei Gendron had a tremendous goal in the game on Saturday. I think that if you look at the special teams, the power play is still pretty terrible. They didn't have any chances on Friday, but Saturday, that was a difference maker, absolutely, in that game because they were 0 for 4 and they allowed a shorthanded goal. And one of the Hartford goals was an empty netter at the end. So it was like 2-2 and 3-2 for an extended period
Right.
of that game, and the Phantoms were in it until the very last 15, 20 seconds of that game, and special teams had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, special teams we talked about all year. Look, with Gendron, I want to get back to him because he's 21. So
Mhm.
while I had higher hopes for him this year, at least he has 13 goals. Maybe he ends up with close to 20. If he could do that, I'd feel like, okay, he's sort of on track. I mean, his overall points aren't going to be where you want him to be, but next year he's going to have to really pick it up. So, we'll see. He's only played 56 games at the AHL level, and so it's not even a full season yet.
Right, yeah, that's where I am with him, that he needs another full year next
Oh, yeah.
year
Before you could even
to.
think about anything.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, but, yeah, I just think this team, like, is completely inconsistent,
It is.
and, with 2 games in a row where they let a team back into it, like, great that they won the first one in a shootout, but, they allowed 2 goals in the 3rd period, so, I think there's just a weakness there in terms of structure and play. Like you say, playing a full 60 is cliche, but it means a lot with
It
this
does. No,
particular
no. I
team.
mean, it does mean a lot. We've talked about lack of structure pretty much all year, and then it was pointed out in other ways. So, yeah, I mean, playing a full 60 matters. I mean, it does get the Flyers some wins that they normally wouldn't get just because of that effort. And yeah, any team could get extra wins that way. No question.
Yeah, I think so. Now, you know, the other thing here, I think, is that the fact that they mix things up so much, I think is a detriment here. And I know it's because 'cause they're trying to get people in and get them
Right.
playing, but I just think they're mixing things up way too much. And like Samu Tuomala, for instance, has actually played, I would say, significantly better. It's still not
Right.
great, but
Right.
he's over the last like 2 weeks, he's played consistently better. He had that 2-goal game last week, and I think that he had some really good quality chances in both games. I thought he was creating plays. He scored a shootout goal in that win on Friday. Didn't get any during regulation, but had some significant chances. But, when you mix him around and play him with different guys, like literally every single game, like that is not helpful for him. And when he's at this very pivotal moment where you want to keep his momentum going, like don't change things for him.
Right. No, I think that's a big thing. And I'm also noticing I see they're giving some Reading players a look. Okay. I mean, that doesn't
That's
happen
been
off.
partially because of the injuries and the call ups to the
Right.
Flyers.
Right. And that is another weakness because most of the time there aren't guys in the ECHL that you want on your AHL roster. No offense. It's just a
Yeah.
lot of times most of the time that's the way it is. So,
Yeah.
Pizarro gets in
Because that
there.
Yeah, he hasn't been half bad, I'll say. Like he's fit. I think he's fit in okay, but that's not
That's not a
extremely high
glowing
praise.
endorsement, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
But I
those
think
guys could skate a little, sure. I
yeah.
remember I remember him at RIT and UMass, and that's fine. But the point is, the more you do that, the more it does water it down. And, again, I don't know. I do kind of wonder where the mixing up on the D pairs is coming from. I mean, are they looking at stats and deciding game to game? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I do think there's too much
There's too much of
mixing
it.
going on. The Phantoms have 3 games this week. Friday on Valentine's Day at Wilkes-Barre Scranton, who is the uh, second place team in the division, but first place in terms of points percentage. They're playing them again on Sunday at home, and the game in between on Saturday is against Syracuse, another really good team that they have struggled a little bit against recently. So we'll see.
Yeah, they just need to pick it up. Their top 4 guys could all do better. Ali aside, because he's just got shipped around too much, so I can't put too much on him. But everybody else needs to pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. On the Wednesday show, we will talk USA and Finland for Four Nations. We'll have our mailbag and more. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So let us know those mailbag questions via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment on our YouTube channel. I am Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at R Miriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert. Get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.